not a man, he's a monster. How could he do that? Then I realised that his wife and his daughter was sitting behind me. Both blonde hair, the same as Melanie.
Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. Welcome or welcome back. I'm uploading daily until the end of the year, so make sure that you're subscribed and your notifications are turned on. We have a live chat every single day when the videos drop at 7 PM UK time, so I'll see you there. Thank you so much to all of my patrons. If your name is on screen right now, then you're a legend. Our love and respect goes out to everyone that knew and loved Melanie. Melanie Ann Rode was a happy teenager, one with an incredibly bright future ahead of her. She was born on September the 29th, 1966, to Jean and Anthony Rode in Bath, Somerset, UK. Melanie was the youngest of three siblings. She was the baby of the family. However, her older brother Adrian and older sister Karen described her as the intelligent one. Her mother described her as being a child who had her head screwed on, and it seems that she did. Melanie excelled in just about everything that she did. She was the deputy head girl at school and she seemed well liked by everyone. The 17-year-old was at a pivotal point in her life. She was making plans for the future and it seemed she had big dreams. While some teenagers are tempted away from academic pursuits when they get their first taste of freedom, Melanie realised the value of her education and wanted to make something of herself. She understood balance. While she studied hard, she made plenty of time for her friends and boyfriend too. She loved music and was said to have never argued with anyone. Her peers described her as bubbly, as did her family and neighbours. With everyone having such warm opinions of her, the shocking details of the brutality she would endure would come as a real blow to those who knew her, as well as the wider community and the country. The straight-A student had been working very hard with her close-knit circle of students. She was just about to sit her A-level exams, with plans to study in the field of archaeology. But Melanie would never sit these exams, nor would she become the archaeologist that she dreamed of becoming. There was only so much preparation you can do when it comes to studies, and so Melanie was persuaded into celebrating the end of the term. It was Friday, June 8th, 1984, and that night she, her boyfriend, along with a few friends, headed out to the Beau Nash nightclub to let their hair down before the A-level exams began the following Monday. Melanie's mother remembered dropping her off at the club. She remembered her bright and bubbly girl had made a smart comment about how the club had rolled the red carpet out especially for her. Unknowingly, this would be the final thing that Mother Jean ever heard her daughter say. The group enjoyed themselves. They drank, danced and laughed the night away. As time drew on, they all left together before separating en route to see themselves home. It was a walk that Melanie had made many times before, and although her boyfriend did ask if she wanted him to call her a taxi, fearless Melanie declined. She had often taken the route alone and Bath was indeed a safe town. She had no reason to believe that the walk this night would be any different. Melanie almost made it home to her family that Friday. She powered through the half-hour walk and was just 200 meters from her house. But she would make it no further. In the early hours of Saturday, June the 9th, Melanie's promising future was snuffed out. Her final moments were described as lengthy and brutal. It would later be revealed that the fair-haired teenager had bravely fought back despite the ferocity aimed towards her, but to no avail. As dawn came, her lifeless body, described as mannequin-like, was sadly discovered by a little boy helping his father deliver milk. He came upon a trail of red DNA on St. Stephen's Road. This trail led to a cul-de-sac just a 3-minute walk from Melanie's home. The crime scene was a grisly one and must have left a mark on those who discovered it. 999 was quickly called and police put a striped tent over the area to shield the public from the barbaric sight. The body that greeted officers that morning bore 26 separate wounds, all around 4 inches deep. Most of them were to the soft tissue area of her chest. Melanie had been jabbed at through her clothing, but it soon became obvious that the clothing had been removed, but then replaced while her attacker atrociously violated her, gratifying only himself. Her undergarments were found a little further afield later on. The spatter at the scene told them that she had been attacked while standing initially, and then chased around the corner before being brutally laid into. For the officers at the scene, securing the area, shielding the public, and of course identification of the body was a priority. Not far from where she lay lifeless were her house keys. On them was a wooden keyring bearing the name Melanie. With nothing else to go on, police took to slowly driving around the surrounding streets. They simply asked, "Does anyone know Melanie?" with a megaphone. Mother Jean and Father Tony had awoken that morning to discover their daughter's bed was empty. They were both rightly feeling a little worried, but nothing could have prepared them for the bitter reality that they would soon have to face. Hearing the name Melanie muffling through the mechanical sounding amplifier as the police slowly drove around their neighbourhood meant that panic quickly set in. Jean frantically flagged down the vehicle driving by. She told them their daughter Melanie had not arrived home the night before. It was then that her world was shattered forever. She was initially spared the ruthless details of the heinous crime, but she couldn't avoid it forever as it was about to circulate throughout the town. But the harsh truth was, their daughter wasn't coming home. With a monster on the loose capable of such a merciless act, and plenty of evidence at the scene of the crime, the force began a manhunt which they dubbed Operation Rodium. DNA found at the scene matched just 3% of the population, a rare DNA that helped narrow down suspects considerably. But what would follow were years upon years of dead ends. Between 1984 and 1989, 94 suspects were arrested through Operation Rodium on suspicion of Melanie's case. Frustratingly though, every single one was ruled out. Sadly, the forensic capabilities of the 1980s were nowhere near today's standards, and so Melanie's case appeared to be destined to become a cold one, like countless others. Mother Jean resigned herself to the fact that Melanie's killer may never be brought to justice for his wicked deeds. She believed the Rode family would never get the closure that they so deserved.
We are hoping for success on another case that's remained unsolved for decades. The rape and murder of a teenager, 17-year-old Melanie Rode. For a quarter of a century, Melanie's family have had to live with the knowledge that her killer has never been caught. Can you bring them some comfort by naming him tonight?
In 2009, 25 years after the night of Melanie's attack, a Crime Watch special aired with a reenactment of Melanie's final movements that fateful night, her route from the nightclub, and her savage demise. Melanie's case didn't just make it to TV by chance. 2009 was the year that 41-year-old single mother of three, Detective Sergeant Julia McKay, had been assigned to cold cases. The detective had given 20 years to the force, but she was rarely promoted because of what she described as internal workplace misogyny. She shared how in her previous role, when she was assigned to burglaries, a co-worker had remarked, "What will you do when you catch a burglar? He's ironing?" The attitude she faced from colleagues in the workplace only drove her to be more determined in her approach to work. Once she was assigned to cold cases, which more often than not remained unsolved, and then stumbled upon Melanie's case, she took note of how much paperwork had been gathered and the enormous efforts of Operation Rodium and felt in her gut that this may be solvable. With not much more than a hunch, she visited Mother Jean, unaware of the supportive mother-to-mother relationship that would blossom between the two of them. Jean had been on an emotional rollercoaster for 25 years. She divorced from husband Tony, who had since succumbed to Alzheimer's disease. He no longer lived in the home. She didn't have much hope that Melanie's killer would ever be found at this point. She was concerned that Detective Sergeant Julie McKay was just one of many who had tried and failed to find the man responsible. In fact, Jean's hopes had been raised for nothing several times previously. Once when a national database began in 1995 and again in 2000, when a new DNA profile of the killer had emerged from forensic advancements. The monster's profile, however, was now much more detailed. prompting a cold case team to be set up in 2003. Julie made no promises to the woman in front of her. She was honest from the get-go, telling her she was working on nothing but a gut feeling, but she did believe that he could be found. The 25-year anniversary Crime Watch appeal was hit and miss. Televised calls for help tend to bring out a lot of bad leads, with some people just wanting their 5 minutes of fame. And with a case so old, many genuine memories of the night in question were likely to be foggy at best. And annoyingly, none of the 72 new leads generated from the broadcast were of any use at all. However, Julie was unconcerned. She knew that breakthroughs are being made all the time in cold cases. That is, since the birth of the national database. Melanie's killer had left so much evidence at the scene of the crime, his bodily fluids were everywhere. Melanie had fought back. The killer had also been stabbed during the initial struggle, and this DNA had been swabbed. Police had been looking for familial DNA matches since the early 2000s. In 2010, the familial database was funded and updated. There were now 400 possible family members found the second time around, and they were investigated to see if they had anyone in their lives that would match the callous killer's profile. However, it would be another 5 long years before Julie found what she was looking for. It would appear that a year before, in an area of Bath, not far from Melanie's family, a 41-year-old woman had been processed after she broke a necklace during an altercation with a boyfriend. The woman, Claire Hampton, had been cautioned and released, but the DNA that had been taken from her during that arrest had recently been added to the database.
If a relative is arrested, and it has to be a close relative, the clever scientists can say, this person's DNA is so similar to your crime scene, there is a likelihood that it's one of their relatives. And you get a list. So we applied for that and we got our list again. And his daughter was at the top of that list. So we went and swabbed him.
In a stroke of luck for Detective McKay, Claire Hampton was what they refer to as a screamer, a familial DNA match that compares so heavily that it screams direct relative. They issued a warrant to collect DNA samples from her living relatives. The cold case team learned that she had a father, a man who fit the age profile, and who had lived in Melanie's area during the time that the atrocity occurred. Not much else of the profile fit though. To a passerby, her father, Christopher Hampton, seemed very ordinary. He was reportedly a good parent in a loving marriage, and he still worked as a painter-decorator despite his advancing years. However, when police took his swab, which the man gave calmly, willingly, and without emotion, the DNA profile was identical to that recovered on a 17-year-old's body more than 30 years earlier. In finding her match, Julie promptly arrested the then 63-year-old on suspicion of murder on July 3rd, 2015. When the police came for his arrest, his puzzled second wife said, "I'll see you later," to which her cold-hearted husband chillingly replied, "No, you won't." Hampton refused to comment during questioning, and in a pre-prepared statement, he had the audacity to deny any involvement. This man had managed to deceive the world for 3 decades. His wife and children would soon learn of his true nature and the horrific things that had happened at his hands. Those who knew the man had nothing bad to say about him, but it turns out they didn't know much about him at all. To have violated and mutilated a young woman, and then to have gone on and played happy families for so long, didn't sit well with criminal psychologists. The man really had fooled all of them, but with the advancements made over the 31-year period, his involvement as a culprit was undeniable. The case went to trial. Hampton eventually pleaded guilty and was near silent throughout. As a matter of fact, he appeared completely emotionless, even during the harrowing details of what he had done, as well as the emotional contents of the family's impact statements.
I always said if I got hold of him, I'd strangle him or stick a knife into him, and that's how I felt, but I wouldn't even use my energy up on him. I feel that he should be shut up in a dungeon like they used to in the olden days and just left to rot, because he's not worth looking after. I know that's against the law, but I can think that. I'm allowed to think that.
It may have taken 31 years, But thanks to huge efforts taken in the 80s to record the crime scene along with modern day forensics, Melanie's monstrous killer was finally behind bars, where he belonged. Christopher Hampton was sentenced to a minimum term of 22 years. Please do let me know your thoughts and leave your condolences down in the comments. Over 50% of you watching right now aren't subscribed, so all you've got to do is just hit that button and turn notifications on. Remember too to hit like if you appreciate what I'm doing here. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.